Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining Camp Modern Sales this week. So exciting to have you here today. Tony, Amanda, and I are walking through a data expedition, navigating the wilds of data-driven customer success. So we have a really awesome group of CS leaders here today, and I'm sure a lot of awesome attendees. And we'll just jump right in. So before we do introductions, I kind of wanted to set the stage here. And I think for a CS leader in SaaS today, the word of the year has been efficiency. And a lot of us are feeling pressure to continue to do more with fewer resources and smaller teams. And if you're a CS leader, you are aware of all the hot new tools on the market. It's probably coming at you left, right, and center from SDRs who are cold calling, emailing, LinkedIn messaging, smoke signals, what have you. And with AI now within arm's reach, you're feeling pressure to ensure your team is running as intelligently as possible, aside from just as efficiently. And again, with fewer and lower cost resources, of course. Of course, you got your boss on the board expecting accurate forecasts, even if they're a little less pretty than they were this time last year. And you want to get that right too. And did I mention with fewer and lower cost resources? Personally, I think that the silver bullet for solving for all of these pressures and competing directions that CS leaders are being pulled in today is using data. But there's a reason that this event isn't titled a walk in the park, because it's really not easy. And I'm very excited to talk about this with such amazing speakers, to hear how they've navigated the dense forest, if you will, that is data-driven CS management and leadership. Because it's camp, and what's better than camp, I want to make sure that this is a good time. So be yourself, whether you're a speaker or you are in the chat, and make this a fun part of or departure from your day. To make sure that this is fun and we're setting off on the right note, I'm going to introduce each of our speakers first, just with their name, title, company, and the most fun fact that I could find about them on LinkedIn, which is, of course, a notorious place to find fun facts about people. And then I'll have each of them kind of just talk about their role a little bit more in depth, and then we can get into this discussion. And also I'll ask that the speakers give us a place they'd recommend exploring, so that we're kind of on theme here, of course. I'll start. I'm Bridget. I run the customer success team at Atrium as the director. We're a sales effectiveness platform that helps organizations produce the best case pipeline needed to hit their number for the quarter. And I would highly recommend checking out Zion National Park. I'm sure all our camp people here would love a kind of venture into nature. And if you need anything specific there, I'd recommend the Angel's Landing hike. So one of my distinguished speakers on this call with us today is Tony Tiffany. She is the Vice President of Customer Success at Orem. And a fun fact about Tony is that she began her career teaching in Korea and transitioned into CS thereafter, where she continues to crush it. So Tony, tell us a little bit more about you, your role, and where you'd recommend we explore.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction, Bridget. So as Bridget mentioned, I'm Tony Tiffany, VP of Customer Success at Orem. We are the AI-powered live conversation platform to supercharge sales activity, connect teams, and drive more revenue over the phone. As far as travel destinations go, I'll be remiss if I do not share where I'm currently joining from today. So I have the privilege of spending this month enjoying the beautiful and diverse geography and ecosystems of Costa Rica. So any of our North American participants, it's a quick and easy flight down to a very welcoming country.
That is so awesome, Tiffany. Tony. Where exactly in Costa Rica are you?
Right now we're in the Jaco area, but we're kind of exploring along the Pacific coast.
That is so awesome. Thank you. And we also have Amanda Schmidt, who is the Senior Vice President of Customer Success at PandaDoc. A fun fact about Amanda is that she invests in real estate, but what you won't see on her LinkedIn is that she's stayed over 5 cumulative years in Marriott's and has over 4 million air miles. So I'm very excited to hear more about your role and also where you recommend that we explore.
That's a lot of customer travel. um, yes, I'm Amanda Schmidt, and I come to you today from PandaDoc. We are the company that helps you automate all of your documents and workflow processes for small to medium business and even upmarket. I lead our CX team, which is essentially everything post-sale and a little bit of pre-sale. I've been a CSM. I've done all of the roles, CSM, implementation, support, you name it. But happy to be here today and look forward to our discussion.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Amanda. Where was your most recent customer trip?
My most recent customer trip was in probably Poland. We have an office there and have a lot of EU customers as well there.
That is amazing. And I don't know if you mentioned a place that you'd recommend exploring. Perhaps it's also Poland, but if you have a
Poland
recommendation.
was great. That was my first time there, believe it or not. But my favorite place in the world to travel is Norway. I just returned from a 2-week vacation in May, and it was lovely. Highly recommend it.
That sounds gorgeous. Well, Costa Rica, Norway, Zion National Park. I don't think you can go wrong. Something for everybody there. But let's get into it. So we'll break this kind of discussion down into probably 3 or 4 topics. And the first that we're going to talk through is unveiling the data safari. And that is more unpacking how we can understand the role of data-driven insights in driving customer success and revenue growth. So big opener here. My first question to both of you, and I'll start with Amanda, is thinking about the last 6 to 12 months. Obviously, so much has changed in the market with the economy, with AI, and just SaaS evolution moving at the speed of light. Have you discovered any new leading indicators in your data set that help you drive or predict revenue growth?
Wow, that's a big question. We've had so much focus this year on data and insights and actions. We actually, as a company, made the decision to become much more customer centric. And the outcome of that, not only internally for us, is tight alignment with our product team and go-to-market, all of our go-to-market teams, but also to drive the best customer outcomes. And, we look at several health scores. For a couple of years, we only had visibility into the account level. Now we have visibility much more granularly at the user level. And it's something we're still iterating on, but we have something called a health account score, HAR. We have one that we use in Gainsight, and it basically is our Gainsight health score that assigns a green, yellow, or red health score by measuring 6 different metrics that are impactful to adoption. And with heavier weighting on these metrics, it basically drives our actions from either a CSM perspective or an AM perspective. So driving adoption or driving expansion, and of course, renewals as well. This score gives everyone on the team the visibility that they need to proactively assist accounts that aren't adopting, and also mitigating risk for our business. And with the economic climate that we're in today, this is hugely important, as you know. So prioritizing red accounts or even yellow accounts shows a CSM or an AM where they need to be spending their time. And, if, for example, a customer is only using 20% of their licenses, it would inform the CSM they need to do a success plan, for an example. But that's kind of a highlight to it. It also informs lots of other calls to actions for the team and prescriptive actions and playbooks.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's interesting, how each company in CS org decides to create its health scores, because it's obviously going to be so different depending on your teams, depending on your customers, and like what you even can measure. I am curious, Amanda, as a follow-up question, if you could wave a magic wand, is there like another piece of data that you would include in that health score that maybe it's not impossible to measure it, but just some kind of pie in the sky dream?
Oh gosh, there's a lot probably, but I think one of the things that it hasn't been a surprise to us this year, but as I mentioned, with kind of the economy where it is and a lot of companies reining their spending in, it would be to predict things like that, but that's so hard to do, right? But right now, we are on the right track with the analytics that we have started planning at the beginning of the year, and it's really helped us minimize the churn and contraction risk. We're in a much better place than many companies, and we're very grateful for that. So data and insights are king.
For
Can't
sure.
live without it.
Thank you. That was super, super interesting to hear more about HAR. I like the acronym, easy to use. And Tony, I would love to hear from you in the last 6 or 12 months, any new pieces of data that have been really helpful for you in predicting revenue growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Amanda was onto something where she said, over the past year or two, they've taken their health scores from just an account org level down to even a user level. And that's an area that we've put a lot of attention on as well, particularly as it relates to revenue growth or expansion. We primarily, our end users are salespeople, SDRs, AEs, sales managers, is who we're primarily interacting with. And so what we've seen, especially in the past couple of years, is, a lot of people might move around, or those users become some of our biggest champions. So if I were to break down our health score into a couple underlying components that I think are most helpful when we look at the end user, is the insight we get from their NPS as well as usage data combined have been really good leading indicators with some of our main champions. It's been really good in helping us kind of understand willingness to introduce us to their peers, as well as advocate internally on our behalf as it relates to both renewal and expansion opportunity. Outside even of within their org, sales professionals move around a lot, right? It's like we're constantly seeing our users come in and out as they switch organizations, but keeping track of the champions and former users who consistently gave positive NPS and had healthy usage throughout their tenure has created really good revenue opportunities for us. We have multiple repeat buyers who've brought Orem in to each new organization they land. Kind of a fun story is we've even had a kind of former champion who negotiated purchasing Orem as part of an offer letter from a prospective employer, right? So building and paying attention to the cues that might highlight these strong champions have been a great opportunity for us to expand revenue with those key users.
I relate so hard to like the users that we interact with, because we also sell to sales organizations and often are working with sales managers and sometimes their reps. And I think that what's interesting, what I'd love to hear more about your approach here is like, a lot of times those particular roles don't have any buying power. Like they could be, very influential. And I think that's probably why you're using the word champion. But I have two questions for you. One is, how do you like enable those champions to really be effective? And then two is, with everything flying around in Salesforce and the nature of sales orgs being like such high turnover, how do you keep track of and stay organized and like tracking people as they move to different organizations?
Yeah, really awesome questions. I'll start with that first one where you talk about kind of how do we enable our champions as they are advocating for us internally with whether it's their CFO, but whoever the EB is. We do this in a few ways. at, and data is at the core. So as we're helping them enable, let's say a renewal is coming up or they have another team they want to add and they need to make a business case, we actively partner with our champions to build a business case based on data. And that's drawing out and really illustrating the ROI they can expect from continuing with Orem or from expanding and adding a new team onto it. And so we use the data and success they've had in their account in order to paint that picture and really get down to the numbers, because we know that's what the economic buyer, like that true decision maker, ultimately cares about. So that's one area that we partner with our champions to tee them up mostly for success. But it really starts much before, right? Long before we actually get closer to the renewal and building that business case. It really starts at the beginning of our relationship with these champions, where we actually sit down and we walk through it. We call the math of sales and say, look, what are your pipeline goals? Where are you trying to get? And let's do some of your backwards math with your conversions to understand what it will take for you and your team to get there. And we set goals early and help track to those with our champions throughout. So it also gives us and them a good indicator of how they're performing and how we're trending. That part's critical for us to really partner and build a consistent business case with our customers.
Totally. Thank you. I was asking that selfishly because I was like, I literally need to know like the answer to that question. And then my second question was, how do you stay organized around tracking people when they leave the company, which often happens like kind of suddenly? Do you have any tools that you use to keep track? I know that there's some on the market. I think User Gems is one, or like spreadsheets, Salesforce fields, anything like that that helps you stay organized.
Yeah, great question. That's an area that we're working to improve upon even more this year. We've seen how much value that has brought in. We definitely have looked at, like you said, there's tools like User Gems that can help. Today, we're really leveraging a combination of product to help us know when our users are coming in and out of the platform, and Salesforce to drive some of those notifications and alerts of the customers, particularly the champions that we see and suspect are going to be strong advocates. So we can follow and kind of reconnect with them at the ideal time.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's the nature of selling to sales organizations for sure. I feel that on a deep level. So I appreciate you sharing more on that, Tony. So moving right along, topic number 2 here, the analytics expedition. We've reached it. We've gone past the data safari. Now we're on to the analytics expedition. So I'd love to hear more about how we're leveraging predictive analytics and data modeling, not just to anticipate like revenue growth, but kind of backing up a little bit ahead of that and going, how do we predict customer behavior and proactively address their needs? CS is doing so much. We're trying to get renewals in, but we also need to get people to use the platform, and it's a tall order. So I'm going to break down that topic into a couple of parts. One is anticipating customer behavior, and one is proactively addressing their needs. Amanda, I'd love to hear, how do you approach anticipating customer behaviors like usage?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we track a number of things in our scores that help us become predictive. Some of the things that we track today are the percentage of active seats against occupied seats, and the percentage of occupied seats against paid seats, the CRM rate, past due, engagement since their last call, NPS, all at both an account level and, in the right cases, user level, what features they're using to know where they're going to be so that we can anticipate that. But back to Tony's point, under the last question, one of the things that we also provide our champions are things called our automated success metrics. And most other companies that I've worked at, your CSM would spend anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours or maybe days preparing the just lost connectivity. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that. So our CSMs provide an automated success metrics plan that shows a customer how they're benchmarking against customers like them and also others in the vertical or other verticals. And that combined with the other data that we have helps them propel to the next level of optimization.
Interesting. So you're literally telling your customers, hey, here's where you're at. Here's where you're at compared to other orgs that are similar to you. And are you sharing that adoption score with them? Amanda, I'd love to understand what information you are sharing with the customer when you're benchmarking, when you're like exposing that benchmarking to them. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's typically like the number of contracts that they send out, how many are signed, what the duration is, metrics like that that help them improve the velocity either in their new business sales operations or renewal operations or expansion operations.
That's interesting. Do you think that like motivates them to adopt more? Or like
Generally,
cool.
you know, everyone's pretty competitive. You know, one of our biggest personas is a sales team or a CS team, and you know, they want to be the front runners. They don't want to be the laggards.
For sure. Yeah. There's nothing like a leaderboard for to motivate people, a sales team. That's super interesting. And kind of going into the second prong of this topic, proactively addressing needs. Tony, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you act on the information that you're able to glean from those insights and kind of what you do proactively.
Yeah. So I am, Amanda talked about some of the key metrics they're tracking, like active seats, occupied seats, the percentage of one to the other. We added a kind of a fourth metric in there that ties into predicting when we should reach out and who to reach out to. And that's what we call engaged user. So we have an active user, which is a basic minimum of what defines an active user versus just occupied seat. And engaged is really where we want to see people land and get our users land. And that really helps us drive as to who's doing well and where to pay attention to. We also will look at data, not just their usage, but looking at the results of that usage. So for Orem customers, usage would be the dials, kind of number of calls they're making or initiating, and some of the results are the live conversations and meetings booked as a result of those dials. So by analyzing this, and it's something we can do at scale, we can pretty fairly consistently tell us which users have a solid grasp of Orem and which ones need additional help and insight. And what kind of help they might need. So that's where we'll TN, whether it's automated or sometimes not automated outreach, depending on what type of help we're determining they likely need for our CSMs to engage. I'll say, we probably have a little bit of an advantage there, although I think everyone on this call might be in similar, since we all serve as sales organizations, but Orem being built kind of by SDRs and for SDRs, and us using our own platform, it gives us an advantage in understanding and anticipating how our users will behave and what that behavior is indicating.
Mm-hmm. Tony, I'm curious. You've had several years of experience in CS throughout, kind of the ranks and flow of a CS trajectory. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, is there anything throughout those years that you kind of swear by in terms of like, all right, no matter what year it is, like this piece of data around customer behavior or, this type of scoring, modeling, or what have you is timeless, and you'll kind of, you've carried it with you throughout those years. I would love to hear kind of what that is for you, if anything.
I don't have anything creative for you other than like at its very basic form. And primarily the tools, the software, the products I've supported have had very high user engagement, where it actually requires someone logging in and using the tool on a daily basis, right? So at its core, that usage is the biggest and most valuable indicator. If someone's not using the product, they're not getting the value, and we can anticipate churn. So all of our initial focus is around, do we have usage trending in the right direction? And then layering upon that is optimizing it. So you just can't get away from someone has to use a product to see the value.
Yeah, and I hope that's helpful information for everybody on this call too, because like I think as somebody who has worked in CS as an IC and then as a manager and leader at only one company so far, it's interesting to hear like what are the things I should just embrace because they're coming with me no matter where I go, you know? So usage totally makes sense. Amanda, anything for you? Because your experience has been you've worked in all kinds of places. Anything that kind of remains timeless?
I would say one of the things I'm most excited about is having a voice of the customer program where, you know, there's so much information and you have to listen to your customers. You know, as much as we use PandaDoc internally, we are not our customer. And we need to know and hear from them. And we have so many touch points across our customer journey, and being able to harness all of that data so that you have a holistic view that helps you be able to deliver the right service at the right time in a predictive manner is killer. It's awesome. It will drive tremendous business outcomes for you.
Yeah, that's definitely something we don't have at Atrium in any like formal sense yet, but something that worked this year with our product team is like connect product to the voice of the customer as frequently as possible and as proactively as possible. I think that's definitely something that we're trying to do is like proactively rather than reactively. And it's been super, super helpful for kind of like unifying our go-to-market team around an approach that's going to work for our customers because, you know, we've talked directly to them about it.
Yeah.
Thank you both. That is really interesting. So usage and voice of the customer as a CS leader, I gotta embrace it. Can't escape. So moving into charting new territories around innovative techniques for personalization, hyper targeting, and segmenting customers to enhance engagement and satisfaction. I think I'm gonna start by asking about segmentation because I think that both of you have pretty enthusiastic opinions about this, and so I'm excited to hear what you think. Do you think that it's ever too soon to segment your customers? So, all right, no's right away.
Easy no.
Lightning style round. I think that's actually interesting for people who are watching visually. So, both of them shook their head no immediately and said no. There's never a time that's too soon to segment. Amanda, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's never too soon. I've worked in all sizes of companies from very early stage to, you know, like under 60 employees to companies like Adobe with thousands of employees. So, and customers. And today at PandaDoc, we have over 50,000 customers, but it's never too soon. You need to segment, you need to get tailored, you need to get personal. We do all of our outreach based upon segments and role, and that helps us be super specific to exactly what they need to optimize their best results.
Awesome. I'm being sold as we speak. And Tony, what do you have to add around segmentation?
Yeah, I mean, I echo it's never too soon to start segmenting your customer base. I'll add a little bit of a caveat, right? So we might have folks in the audience here who had very early stage companies, right? And they're saying, I'm the only CSM and we have 25 customers, right? Like, what's the point of segmenting? But I would argue that even in the early stages, it takes time to figure out what the proper segmentation is for your customer base. And so early on, start by testing out and tracking a few different segmentation models to see which one actually best represents kind of the customer base you have. Understanding that and doing that research super early, even when you're at 25, 50, 100 customers, is going to set you up for success when you do try to start building segment-based workflows, automations, messaging. So never too early to start. And if you're in the very early stages, try out several different models around segmentation, because every company has kind of different segments, and segmentation strategy is going to work best for them. So that helps you figure out and get past some of the early hiccups and understand what model's best for you before you spend a lot of time investing in automating outreaches, building the workflow specific to a certain segmentation. Outside of that, and Amanda hit on it a little bit by talking about roles, but I would say when you do start creating workflows and automation, for me, I found starting with some persona-based versus other ways you might segment your accounts is often brings some of the biggest returns there. So, start with segmenting and understanding key persona and needs. And then, we found the needs and behaviors of an admin user might be very different than a non-admin end user and require different messaging and touch points. So that's for us where we really started in diversifying some of the automation and workflows.
That's super helpful. Thank you. I think it's daunting for sure, but that's motivating. And Amanda, anything you would add?
Yeah, I think one factor, there's so many different ways you can segment. Don't forget about maturity of the customer. That is hugely important because you could have it segmented differently and you're doing what you think are the right activities, but it's at the wrong time for them. So maturity is key.
I would love to hear how you learned that lesson. If you have any anecdotes, Amanda, because I feel like anytime anybody has like a really strong stance on something, it's because they may have learned the hard way, or maybe I'm just projecting. But I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
I think we experimented with this and kind of cracked this nut when I was at Marketo, and it just helped us zero in even further. I mean, we were segmented by company size and vertical and role, but to really bring it all together, it made it so much more impactful to understand not only where each company was, but where each user was in their journey.
Yeah, I think at Atrium we've our subject matter is data-driven sales management, and actually Orem is one of our customers, and we had an implementation flow back in the day 2 years ago or so, where one of the first calls that we did with our customers was a goal setting call, where Tony kind of sounds similar to what you mentioned around backwards math, like being like, what are your goals? And I'm sure, honestly, our subject matter, like conversations with our customers are very similar, but what are your goals? And like, what do we need to do backwards from that? And goals that we need to set across these different metrics in Atrium that, you can set. And if you follow them, everything's going to go great. And we were met with a lot of people being like, whoa, what do you want us to do? Like, this is kind of a lot, right? And so that exercise can be awesome for people at a certain level of maturity in their data-driven sales management journey, but like forcing it on people it often was like damaging sometimes, because it just like didn't feel right. It wasn't a great way to kick off the customer relationship. So since then we've changed our implementation motion, but I think it's interesting, like, there's so many things you want your users to do in their first 90 days or so, because you're so jazzed about the product and like how great they could be if they just did X, Y, Z. But sometimes you just got to leave it at X and really crush it at X. And then, next time, 3 months later, we can handle Y. And I think I learned that like slow and steady, but doing something really well, and then moving to the next thing is a better way to like progress maturity rather than like diving in the deep end. So that's a lesson that we learned as well. And any criteria, I guess, Tony, you had said like, hey, it's good to test out different ways of segmenting. Any ways that you found were like really ineffective that you haven't tried again? Or is there, nothing is ruled out at this point?
I wouldn't say there's a universally like wrong segment or criteria to use when segmenting customers, but I do believe there's kind of varying levels of effectiveness, and there are right or wrong for certain orgs. So, for example, when we were working on our customer segmentation here at Orem, shortly after I joined, we really thought that segmenting our customers on the post-sale side based on maybe company size alone, which is part of how they do on our pre-sales side and the go-to-market, might be all that's needed, right? And do what we needed to do as far as customer segmentation. But it turned out, it's fairly obvious, but turned out that the size of an organization, a company, doesn't necessarily indicate the specific size or structure of the team that we're servicing, of the sales org we're servicing. And so the segmentation model that we use on our sales side doesn't necessarily mean it's the best segmentation model post-sale with our customers. So for us, company size just wasn't the greatest. It wasn't a good indicator of actually who we're supporting and what that team needs. Industry for us really hasn't come in much either, because regardless of the industry our customers in, which our customers come from all different types of industries and backgrounds, their sales orgs all have a lot of the same pain points and problems that they're trying to solve. So that wasn't a segmentation model that was really helpful for us.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Sales, large company does not a large sales org make. We too have learned that lesson. Well, we're approaching the end here. And I really appreciate this conversation. Both of you, thank you so much for sharing, kind of getting into the nitty gritty of how you're using data to predict not just revenue growth, but also consumer behavior, which is also a precursor to revenue growth. So lots of things that we're just trying to predict and read the future on. But I hope that everybody who's been watching has learned something that they can take away back to their CS org. And I'm sure there'll be many more conversations around data in CS to come. But thank you, Tony, and Amanda. You are awesome. And I hope that you have lovely rest of your days.
Thanks so much, Bridget.
All right, thanks.